Michigan beating Washington 34-13. I feel like this was a bit closer of a game than maybe the score indicated. The late interception of the touchdown certainly helped to pull away the margin of victory. But this was a game. I mean, Michigan came out roaring. Washington kind of came back a little bit. And then obviously Michigan, with their touchdown, put a lot of pressure on Washington. And Washington eventually turned the ball over, causing the big interception return that would lead to another Michigan touchdown. Justin, we're going to go to you first. What were your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I thought it was just pretty much it went about how I expected. So my prediction was Michigan and then Washington would keep it close in the first half, and then Michigan would kind of do what they do, a la Rutgers, right? Rutgers kept it close in the first half with their physicality. Michigan just kind of, imposed their will as the game went along. What they do is they wear you down. They're very big, strong, physical, especially at the point of attack and line of scrimmage. So, they went in there against a smaller, less talented Washington team, and they made Washington try to play their game. And, they forced Michael Penix to do what he struggles with, which is the, middle of the field intermediate pass game. He likes the deep ball. He likes the short, quick screens and stuff like that. And they kept the top on the defense. They made him make the throws in the tight windows he doesn't like to make. Michigan was just, and there was no doubt in my mind they were the best team in college football this year. And it went, like I said, about how I expected. I think the score was it played out kind of how the game went out. I think Michigan was so much the better team throughout the game. And I think what really kept Washington in the game the first half was, and we talked about this, JR, was the play calling. The play calling in the first half made no sense to me. You have Donovan Edwards averaging 20 a carry at the time you're on that 4th and 2, and you pass the ball inexplicably, and that 4th and 2, if Michigan converts that, the game's over early. So that kept Washington, and a lot of things kept Washington in the game. But overall, just dominating performance by Michigan. What a way to cap off their season.
Yeah, for sure. I was going back and forth with people a little bit on Twitter about that. I mean, you had Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum both averaging like over 10 yards per carry, and they together had 11 rushing attempts in the first half. J.J. McCarthy had 11 pass attempts, and obviously he was not being nearly as effective passing the ball, and it just didn't make any sense to me. So definitely saw them kind of go back to their Penn State roots in the second half, which I thought was, what they needed to do the whole time. Brant, what were your thoughts?
Thoughts on a championship? Was there a championship yesterday? I remember that about as much as I remember the 2004 championship. Which, if you recall, didn't actually end up existing, which is what's going to happen with this one. It's going to be vacated. I'm not sure why we even played the game. But if it somehow doesn't get vacated, it went, pretty much as expected. Michigan's defense it seems like they're in the right place at the right time at all times. And kind of weird how that happened. Like the secondary, I saw lots of talking before the snap, lots of motion around in the secondary. So not sure if there was a mysterious helper on the sideline there for in the maize and blue, but it sure seemed like it. I mean, whether they had the call or the play calls or not, they just played lights out on defense to hold Mike Penix, who had, one of the better, I'd say the best season in college football this year at the quarterback position. Heisman voters disagree with me, but I think Penix probably deserved the Heisman with the season that he had. But to hold him to what they did last night was pretty unbelievable. There's no holes in that defense. They've shown it time and time again all season long, and they won a championship through their defense.
Yeah, I mean, it was my question, what Michael Penix Jr. were we going to get? Were we going to get the Oregon State Michael Penix Jr. where, he's less than 200 yards? Yes, he had 2 touchdowns, but he also had a pick. Were we going to get the Arizona State Michael Penix Jr. where, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, a lot of yards, but still not very much production there. And early on, I thought, well, he's kind of dealing here. He's missing a few throws, but we could get the really good Michael Penix Jr. But he just kept missing throws, and I don't know if that was on him or on the wide receivers. But Michael Penix Jr. had to be his best self in order to win this game, and he just wasn't. I think some of that goes to him, but I think you also got to give Michigan credit for their interior pressure they were able to get with the defensive line. They were rotating 4 guys in there, and you really couldn't, unless you were looking at the numbers, you really couldn't tell who was in there because all 4 of those guys, Graham, Jenkins, Goody, Goody's a basketball player. And then Grant, like all 4 of those guys were getting insane pressure, and it was hard to watch as somebody who was rooting for Washington in that one. Gabriel, what were your thoughts on the game?
Yeah, we saw Michael Penix having to try to adjust on the fly to that constant in-your-face pressure. And even on the throws he was able to get off, he definitely did not look comfortable and looked rushed. But I want to bring up a slightly different point here. Michigan, they won the championship, and we'll have an asterisk or not, we'll see. But more to the point, I think Michigan fans are doing this team a disservice. By now, I'm seeing it proclaimed that this is the best team ever, the best college football team ever. I mean, just off the top of my head, in the modern playoff era of basketball, I think of the Deshaun Watson Clemson team. I think of any Alabama team that's won. Who else? The Joe Burrow team, LSU. The OSU team that was led with J.T. Barrett, Cardell Jones, Ezekiel Elliott. Those are all teams off the top of my head that I think would definitely rank better, definitely more explosive on offense. And so now, instead of us celebrating what was an overall really good season for this Michigan Wolverines team, I'm now forced to be in a position to say, Michigan Wolverines fans, this isn't the best team of the last decade, let alone of all time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I put a question out there just basically right after the game was over. I ranked all the playoff teams for the Big Ten over the 4-team playoff era, and at the top I had tied 2014 Ohio State, 2023 Michigan, and I felt like that was a good kind of tie there. And I asked people what do you think? Who is the better team here? Obviously, I had a lot of Ohio State fans saying 2014 Ohio State, and I had some Michigan fans telling me 2023 Michigan. And then, like you, Gabriel, I went off that post, and I said, and I started looking, and I was like, this is not the best team in college football ever. Trust me, I would love for the Big Ten to have the best team in college football ever. But if we're being honest here, very good running game, very good defense. But if you ask me, this was the worst pairing of quarterbacks ever in the national championship game. I've never seen a worse, performance by 2 quarterbacks in the national championship game. JJ McCarthy was like 10 for 18 for 100 some yards. Michael Penix Jr. He had a very low completion percentage, had a lot of yards, but he only had 1 touchdown pass, 2 interceptions. The only thoughts I have about maybe worse was that Tua's first national championship game. I know he didn't have great stats, but still, I mean, in national championship games, we've gotten some pretty good quarterback performances, and I just felt like that we didn't get that in this game. Obviously, Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards were fantastic for Michigan, so I'm not taking anything away from them. But Justin, did you have the same thoughts as me that like this is just not the quarterback play we're used to seeing in the national championship?
Yes. Well, and especially, McCarthy, when he came out and made that first little 30-yard laser down the sideline of 20, I forget how many yards it was, but that throw was money, right? And from then on out, even the quick hitting throws, he was off. And he has been, accurate all season. He's been the mark of efficiency. And I don't know what it was. I don't think he's the type of person that folds under the lights. I think he's built for that moment, but I think it's going to fly under the radar just because, of course, they won, but that's because Michigan doesn't have to rely on him at all. He can come in and be a effective game manager, which he was. He occasionally picked up first downs when his legs when he needed to. Very underrated as a runner, but he made the plays that he needed to for them to win. He just didn't do what he could have to put that game away earlier. And I think that's the difference. In Penix, they're so reliant on Penix and Washington that he has to do it all himself. And so him being off is, I do think the physicality of Michigan's defense threw him off. I don't think that was something he was accustomed to, but I would have to agree. Just because it was set up to be, I was very excited for the quarterback duel. I don't think a lot of the casual fans knew about JJ McCarthy, knew how good actually he was. And so I was excited for that battle. We, was a little bit disappointed that it didn't turn into, better quarterback play. But overall, I was just happy for the Big Ten, impressed with the way JJ McCarthy didn't get fold under pressure. He didn't start trying to force things. He still stayed within the confines of the offense. He still did what he normally does and just made himself be a game manager when he had to. He just didn't try to put too much pressure. And I that has a lot to do with just how well balanced that team is. And I think Penix was feeling the pressure a lot because he knows how much he means to that team, and that team doesn't go without him. So yeah, I think it's two different sides of the coin as to why they struggled. But yeah, it was disappointing overall.
Yeah, and I think, if you're a Michigan fan, you're watching this and you're like, why are you degrading our team? I'm not. To win a national championship game, score 34 points, and your quarterback only throws for 140 yards and no touchdowns, like, you got a really good team if you can do that, especially against, another undefeated, 14-0 team. And so, Brant, my question to you, is this Washington team as bad as they looked in the national championship, or is Michigan just that good that they made them look like a bad team? What are your thoughts?
No, absolutely not. First off, I just want to say back to the point about McCarthy and his play in the game. I definitely agree with Justin that he made the plays he needed to make, kind of in more of a game manager role than a role where, Penix is kind of forced to play the hand of he has to make the plays or they're not going to win the game. But to the point about McCarthy and how he played, I mean, Michigan almost put it away early with those two big runs from Edwards and then some stout defensive play early on. It was 14-3, and the game could have gotten out of hand real quick, real early. And then they started kind of putting the ball in JJ McCarthy's hands to make plays, and Washington crept right back into the game. They were right there until they started going back to that run game with Corum making some big plays on the ground. It seemed like if the game were in McCarthy's hands, maybe we would have seen a different outcome, because he made the plays when he needed to with his legs at the end of the game to kind of ice the game. He made some pretty clutch third down throws to keep the ball moving. But early on in that game, it really seemed like when they put the ball in his hands, he let Washington back into the game. So that was kind of interesting. Is McCarthy that guy? I don't know, but he just went and won a championship, so got to give him credit where credit's due. But to your point, your question about is Washington that bad? No, not at all. I mean, we saw this team fight through what I think, and we'll touch on this later, is the best conference in college football, or was the best conference in college football this year. And that may be a little bit of a hot take, but the Pac-12 is the best conference in college football and this season, in my opinion. And Mike Penix had his way. I mean, maybe they're not as stout on defense, but that a lot of great teams, top to bottom, that Penix had his way with. He led the nation in passing. That wide receiver trio that Washington has they've got 3 NFL guys that could be drafted in the first round at wide receiver. Probably a few day 2 guys, but Odunze is definitely a first round pick. McMillan's probably a day 2 guy. McMillan and Polk are right there at the bottom of the draft of round 1 potentially, maybe day 2. But yeah, they're a great team. They were in the championship for a reason. They won all their games. They were, I think, the clear cut number 2 team behind Michigan. And Michigan just is that good at all positions. Their defense just unmatched, one of the best we've seen in college football in recent years. And their offensive line really can just open up holes for anybody, even without Zach Zenner out there. It's just different on their offensive line.
Do you mind if I piggyback just real quick on his point in your question? So, and I think what a lot of, what that question has to do with, I think it's coming into the game, right? People watch a Texas game. Washington, look on the screen, it jumps off, right? They look like a sexy team because it's offense, right? Deep throws, electric offense. And I think Michigan, they were in a more physical, grinded out game because that's a Michigan style. Their stats don't jump off the screen because they've been up 50-7 multiple times, or just up by crazy numbers multiple times this season. So I think just the general consensus coming into it was that I think Washington was just a little bit overrated as far as the public consensus. And I think Michigan was extremely underrated based on that. So I think it's more so that than the actual caliber of the teams,
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
One more thing. Just like this kind of Washington team, they kind of remind me of the CJ Stroud Ohio State era, where your defense isn't that great. You've got the sexy offense with the big arm quarterback, the insane wide receivers, but it's just not enough to win championships. And that was proven last night.
Yeah, I felt like they had the receivers. I feel like Michael Penix Jr. was good, not as good as CJ Stroud personally. But the big difference on the defense was, the secondary for Washington, I felt like, was much, much better. But where they really struggled was the defensive line. I never felt like, and I said it in our first preview when Washington first made the playoffs, I never felt like they had the size, the strength, to really battle with some of these SEC defensive lines or offensive lines. And we saw it against Texas. That was a weakness, but Sark kind of got into his own head, and it's kind of what play calling head coaches do, where he kind of went away from what worked, and Michael Penix Jr. was obviously dealing in that game, and they put it away from him. So thanks for listening to the Big Ten Huddle. Please do like and subscribe. We appreciate that. If this was your first time listening, we are the Big Ten Huddle. We cover all things Big Ten football and basketball. We have a long episode every Sunday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night, all at 9 o'clock. So come in, check us out, get in the chat, let us know what you're thinking. We would love to have you join us and learn more about the Big Ten.